Some movies set up a world where there's endless potential to tell new stories, while others tell a fantastic standalone story, but there's not much room to explore that world. But anytime a movie makes enough money, Hollywood wants sequels. So today we're going to look at the top 10 movies that should have stopped after the first movie. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your picks for the franchises that should have stopped with the first movie. The franchises that never should have been franchises in the first place. With that said, before we get started, this video is brought to you by my supporters over on Patreon. Each month, they pick a video for the main channel, and this month, they picked top 10 movies that should have stopped with the first movie. Over on Patreon, I put out a bunch of exclusive videos, companion videos to top 10s on my main channel, and then there's a weekly live stream. If you enjoy my content and want even more, consider joining over on Patreon to get all of those exclusives. In fact, there is a companion video that goes along with this video with 13 more movies that should have stopped with the first one. With that said, let's get started. Coming in at number 10, The Matrix. Now, most of the movies on this list tell self-contained stories that simply didn't lend themselves to telling additional stories in that world. The Matrix is actually an exception to that. Part of what made The Matrix so great was this expansive world building about this war between the humans and the machines and the technology involved in it. There are more stories to tell in that world, and at the end of The Matrix, while that movie tells a complete story, the story of the battle between the humans and the robots isn't over yet, and so it naturally did lend itself to more stories. Unfortunately, the direction that they decided to take the Matrix sequels was to deconstruct the mythology of the first film. And so all the stuff that made the original so cool, so awesome, they decided to find a way to tell a story that undid a bunch of that stuff, thus cheapening what I loved about the original Matrix. But here's what makes this one also so complicated. As much as maybe they should have just stopped at the first one, I still have this naive optimism about the Matrix Resurrections coming out next month. I'm still excited for that movie. Despite the fact I'm pretty sure it's not going to be very good, I'm pretty sure it's going to continue down the wrong path, there isn't still that optimism in me that maybe they will find a way to actually continue that original story in a way that is satisfying and just doesn't cheapen and break everything that worked in the original film. Number 9, Cars. Now, this is a Pixar franchise that sold an enormous amount of merch to children, so naturally they wanted to keep putting out films that would cause more children to want to buy more merchandise. The problem is the original Cars is a story about this big town hotshot that gets stuck in the small town and has to learn humility while he's there. While he is a race car, it's not really a racing movie. The story is about the small town and how it changes him. So when you're trying to do a sequel, there's not really an obvious place to take that. So Cars 2, suddenly they're in Japan and Mater is a spy. And then in the third movie, they tried to turn it into a sports movie where Lightning McQueen is the aging athlete trying to make his comeback, but eventually takes the mentor role. But it just doesn't really capture what made the original one special for so many people, because it in fact is a genre shift, and it's an example of they've got these characters that they know that children like, but they didn't really have a story that was obvious as the follow-up. And it feels like this is a franchise that probably would have lent itself better to direct-to-video sequels or having more kind of cartoons and TV shows for children, but as a cinematic franchise, I don't think it really worked. Number 8, Highlander. Now, this is a bit of an older franchise, so if you're some of my younger viewers, you might not be familiar with it, but in the original Highlander film, it's basically about a group of immortals who are competing in a competition to behead one another to see who will be the final one, because
there can be only one.
So naturally, when that's what the plot of the movie is, you get to the end of the movie and the chosen one, the one, has been determined. There's not room for a sequel. So They decided to do like 5 sequels, a TV series, a spin-off TV show, an animated TV show, and continue this story and this mythology when there's simply no plot threads to continue on as soon as this movie is over with, because it is all about this competition to decide who the one will be, and it's determined inside of the movie, in which case all of the movies are pretty awful. The TV show kind of did its own thing, so it has its own fans, but it's more of kind of a reworking of the mythology rather than a sequel to it. And so this is an example of what should have been just like a cult classic movie that they tried to milk it, even though it wasn't even all that popular of a film in the United States. So I don't even know what they were thinking. Number 7, Poltergeist. Now, the original Poltergeist, I actually watched for the very first time just a few weeks back, and I watched the 2 sequels to it, and it's just a classic example of a great standalone story that at the end of it, there's just not a lot of plot threads to continue on with, and so the sequels feel very forced and have to rewrite the mythology quite a bit just to justify their existence. In the original, this family moves into a home that's built on top of a cemetery.
You son of a bitch, you moved the cemetery, but you left the bodies, didn't you?
And thus, their house is haunted. But when you get to the sequels, they've left the house. When you get to the 3rd movie, they've even lost all the cast except this one little girl, and they're suddenly in a skyscraper, and so it just feels like they're cheating to try and find excuses to continue being able to put out Poltergeist movies while not really having much to deliver, and so they're far inferior to the original and kind of cheapen the experience. Number 6, Speed. Now, this was a big surprise hit back in 1994 that solidified Keanu Reeves as a leading man, and it propelled Sandra Bullock to the A-list and really started kind of her career as this leading lady, so naturally they wanted to do a sequel. The problem is the movie has such a self-contained concept.
Pop quiz, hotshot.
There's a bomb on a bus. Once the bus goes 50 miles an hour, the bomb is armed. If it drops below 50, it blows up. What do you do?
It's a great, simple, catchy concept for a thriller, and it really doesn't lend itself to any sequels. And the thing that really kind of amplified the film is that it had a great set of characters, that they happened to get some great casting with Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock before they became as massive of stars as they've been for the last 25 years. And you had a very young Joss Whedon who did a polish on the script to give it some nice, witty banter inside of it. It was a hit. They wanted to do a sequel. That's a problem when you have a movie that has such a concept that just doesn't translate to a follow-up. Add to that, Keanu Reeves didn't want to return, so they ended up doing Speed 2 Cruise Control, where very clearly they wrote a script where it could be with Keanu Reeves or it couldn't, and so that it just forces them onto a different type of a vehicle that's also moving and they can't stop it, and they're just having to contrive the most ridiculous explanations as to why this scenario is happening again while we're following a random girl that happened to be on the bus. There's no real explanation as to why she's the one that coincidentally happens to be there. And so it's just a classic example of Hollywood trying really, really hard to get a sequel out of something that simply doesn't warrant, can't justify a sequel. In 5th place, Dumb and Dumber. Now, I was a teenager in the 90s, and this movie is a treasure to people that are my age. Most of the people I know can quote almost this entire movie from beginning to end. So naturally, Hollywood decided that we needed more Dumb and Dumber. So they did a prequel starring people besides Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels that nobody went to go see, and I've never heard a positive thing about it. And then like 20 years after the original came out, they decided to bring back the original cast to do a sequel that once again kind of just happened and was forgotten about. In fact, when I started working on this video, I didn't initially think about including Dumb and Dumber because it didn't even cross my mind that this is a franchise. But for some reason, Dumb and Dumber is a franchise. Comedy is kind of one of those things that tends to be a little bit more inclined towards lightning in a bottle. The right cast at the right time. Comedy is a bit timely. The way culture works, certain things are funny at certain times. There's a lot of cultural reference things that they don't translate to different time periods. And I think this is a classic example of that. It was the right movie at the right time, and everything else just found them trying to recapture that lightning in the bottle. It simply didn't work. In fourth place, Taken. Now, I'm a sucker for Liam Neeson thrillers, so I find all of these actually watchable, but there is a dramatic drop in quality after the first film, and the simple reason for that is it's a movie that just has a great concept about what if this guy with this incredible set of skills, his daughter was taken, and he used that set of skills to get his daughter back. It was the right actor at the right time, the right concept, and they wrote this amazing speech in it so that they put it all prominently in the trailer.
But what I do have are a very particular set of skills. I will find you, and I will kill you.
That sells the movie wonderfully. It tells you exactly what you're going to get, and it delivers on that. And much like the movie Speed, it has the problem of the movie is such a self-contained concept, but you like the characters, so you think you want more movies, but there's not an obvious additional story to tell there. So they tried to find ways of like, the guys from the first movie, their family members are out for revenge, and what if Liam Neeson got taken? And then that ties into the third one that's basically a remake of The Fugitive, except with Brian Mills. And there just wasn't a way to actually continue onward and deliver the experience that you want from a Taken movie with this set of characters. And so you just got these really sloppily made films. The thing that makes it even worse is that the guy that directed the first one didn't return. They brought in this other guy that's one of the worst examples of kind of the choppy action, quick cuts, and close-up shots. So you can't see anything that's taking place. I mean, it is outrageous the number of cuts in these Taken movies. And so they should have just ended with the first one and had this classic Liam Neeson action thriller. Real quick before I give you my top 3, remember to join me down below in the comments section. Share your picks for the franchises that shouldn't have been franchises. They should have stopped at the first movie. Also remember there is a companion video to this over on my Patreon page with 13 more franchises that should have stopped with the first one. Join at any level, you can unlock that video, plus about 100 other edited videos and over 100 live streams that we've done in the past. Link is down below in the description. In third place, The Hangover. This is another surprise comedy hit that propelled its cast up to the A-list, and naturally that meant that they wanted to make sequels. But the basic premise of The Hangover of these 3 guys getting in this wacky scenario in Vegas where they don't remember what happened before, it's a great self-contained idea that there's no possible way to come up with an excuse as to why this would happen to the same group of guys a second time, but that's what they tried to do. So the second movie, just a total rehash of the original where once again they're in an exciting city, don't remember what happened the night before, and it just repeats the same beats about the missing character and everything. And then the third movie tried to do something different by having this whole narrative and mythology of why all of this keeps happening to all of them and this crime stuff going on behind the scenes. And it's like it completely forgot they were making a comedy and tried to make it an action movie with this big mythology. And it just didn't fit at all. It wasn't fun. And it's just a classic example, like most of the movies on this list, of a story that just works in and of itself. You get to the end of it, it's resolved, the characters have had their arcs, all of the loose ends are tied up, there's no need for anything more, and anything trying to capture the magic here just feels like a convoluted rehash, and that's what the sequels for The Hangover were. Our runner-up, Avatar. Now, this is an interesting one on the list because at the time that I'm shooting this video, there's currently only one Avatar movie, but that's because James Cameron has been working on the 4 Avatar sequels for the last 12 years since the original movie came out. And as someone that is a massive James Cameron fan, it's extraordinarily frustrating to me that in the 21st century, he's only put out 1 movie. And by the time he puts out all 5 of his Avatar films, 30 years will have passed where he will only have made Avatar films. And that is simply crazy to me. First off, because of the actual James Cameron films that he wrote and directed, Avatar is probably my least favorite of the bunch. I still like it, but it's my least favorite of the bunch. Second one, the movie completes its story about Jake and his accepting these people. It's a classic tried and true formula. It's led to all the jokes about it's just Pocahontas, it's just Dances with Wolves, it's just The Last Samurai, it's just Ferngully, because it's a tried and true story template about the soldier that goes primitive to battle the more advanced incoming group of people. And it resolves that plot line in the movie. And he embraces his destiny with them. So there's not like an obvious follow-up to it. More importantly, there aren't 4 obvious follow-ups. And when there's a 12-year gap and we're still a year out from this movie, it's even stranger when you're like, what on earth is going on here? What is James Cameron seeing here that I'm not seeing here? And I wouldn't have been nearly as cynical if Avatar 2 came out 6 years ago. And then he went, did awesome. Now let's do a couple more. But when he stops making movies to just spend the last 30 years of his life, the last 40 years of his life in Pandora, making these sequels, I just can't get there. I don't understand what he's doing. I don't understand why he's doing it. But as someone that loves his movies, it's crazy to me that he put out all the content that he did from 1984 to 1997, and then in the last 20 plus years, one movie, because he decided to keep making Avatar films. But coming in at number 1 is Jaws. So I put up a question on my community tab where I asked you guys which franchise should have stopped at the first one. And the number 1 answer that I saw in there was Jaws, and for good reason. It is a perfect film about a small town that's run on the tourism of people going to the beach there, where a shark shows up 4th of July weekend, and it's got a great set of characters. It slowly builds the tension. The dialogue is amazing, and it made a ton of money, so they decided they needed to make sequels. But even more so than Avatar and every other movie on this list, the idea of a shark attacking a small town is not at all a repeatable concept. So Jaws 2 is just a rehash. It captures the tone, but it's like the idea that this is happening again and people are still in the water, it just strains credibility immediately. The third one, the son from the first 2 movies, is now at SeaWorld, and somehow the same thing happens to him again there. We're in ludicrous territory of this taking place. And in the fourth one, it's literally called Jaws the Revenge, about a shark out for revenge that follows the wife across the world to try and eat her. I mean, this is just out there bananas, which I could have fun with if the movie was self-aware and knew it was stupid, but it's not. It plays it all totally serious while having a plotline about a shark out for revenge that can sense her, and they can sense it, like crazy banana stuff. So this is the ultimate example of taking a concept that's a great movie and just forcing a franchise that's not there. There's no plot threads. There's no logic. There's no scenario. So much more so than the idea of guys getting drunk and forgetting the night before. So much more so than Annie from Speed getting stuck on another vehicle. A shark out for revenge is too ridiculous. But they did it. Someone greenlit that. They went, that's a great idea for a movie. Here's $10 million to make that. That really happened. I don't know what the budget was, but it was enough money that Michael Caine signed up for it. And so, without question, the most ludicrous example of taking a great movie and forcing it into a franchise, I'm going with Jaws at number 1. If you enjoyed this video, remember there is a companion to it over on Patreon with 13 more movies that should have stopped with the first one. The link is down below in the description. Join at any level and you can watch that video plus 100 other edited videos plus 100 live streams that we've done over there, and you can join in the weekly live streams that we do. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.